Good morning, everyone. Let's first pray. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. I'm Eileen Jean Favorada, and our topic is all about internal and external institution and influences of the corporate governance. The phone business and then and now, for several decades until late 1990s, it would take many months and even years before one could get a telephone line installed. At the time, those really in need of the service and can afford the price resort to buying telephone lines from lucky ones who have the phones, but many no longer need them. Then, Philippine Long Distance Telephone Co. or PLDT has a virtual monopoly in the voice business. Until the early 90s, the the company controlled the 95% of the voice market, and with the balance divided among the small rural telephone companies. The regulate of the telecommunication industry is the administration of President Fidel Ramos issued the executive order is number 109 in 1994, otherwise known as the Service Area Scheme. The AOM, the bring basic telephone services to the rural areas of the country, and the fast track the rollout of the landline networks by the telecommunication companies. The Public Communication Policy Act of 1995 was the enact in the 1995 that the setting the policy of the competition and the liberalization of the telecommunication sector, so that they open up the paging and the value added the services business, but continue the regulating the rates of the local exchange carriers, international long distance, and the mobile telephone business, unless there sufficient the competition. Among those that participated sa service area of the scheme were the PLDT, which had a nationwide franchise, the Bayantel, which was awarded the Metro Manila and the Bicol areas, Digital, which was awarded the Central Luzon areas, Eastern Telecom, Northern Luzon, and Isla and Telecoms, Metro Manila, and outlining areas. While implementing of the EO, the 109 was generally assessed a success, and the 1998 issued the financial crisis and the advent of the mobile phone technologies, the result of the mergers among the SAA, the participants. With the nationwide operation, only PLDT and Globe are left competing the lucrative cell phone and internet business. In this term of having a virtual monopoly of the telecommunication industry in the Philippines, PLDT and DTTEL negotiated the share the swap the deal whereby the PLDT, which already owned Smart and Talk and Text, would own the 55% of GDTEL, which owned the SAN. If the deals of the push is true, the PLDT and Digital merge will hold a 70% the market share of the mobile telecommunication business and 84% of the radio frequency for the spectrum in the country. Now, the PLDT to buying into the Digital. The Manila, Philippine, the long distance telephone company has confirmed rumors that it will be acquired a majority stake in the Digital Telecommunication Philippines Incorporate. operator of the mobile network of Sun Cellular from the Gokingwei family. So the PLDT Group, which already operates sa three mobile brands sa Smart, Tech and Text, and Read Mobile, will gain an extra 50 million subscribers with the occupation for the total of the about 60 million users, and it will give a commanding lead in the telecom sector, with that 7 out of every 10 mobile subscribers being in the PLDT network. So it is a big revival for Globe Telecom, and has just over 25 million subscribers. So according to the PLDT chairman of Manuel Pangilinan, this is initiative alter the country of telecom landscape. They accept the competition within the industry to remain the very robust given the other operators, so including the interest and the formidable of and founded in the PLDT.
TV5 GMA7 deal final by end 2012, say MVP. Manila, Philippines updated the much discussed merge between the second and third largest television station GMA and TV5 may be completed before the end of the year, according to TV5 chair Manuel Pangilinan. So at the sidelines of the PLDT annual stockholder meeting on June 14, Pangilinan said, "I would say certainly within the year we should be able to create an agreement. Between the agreement will be subject to a number of conditions for closing." So in these two issue, the situation the need to be addressed for deal can to push to fall through an agreement on price, size, share, and other deal na between them of the GMA 7 and TB5, and a go signal from the government, which is regulation for the media industry. Government nude. He also stressed that the government's nude is needed to close the transaction. To close condition precedents must be satisfied. There are conditions required on their side, on our side. So ang kanisiyang government nude kay needed ni sila to follow the procedure, like mo first join man sila, and sa usa ka company needed nila mo follow para walay mahitabo nila sa ilang usa ka company. Roller coaster. The recent report on a GMA7 TV5 deal first erupted by December 2011. Officials from the both camps have since avouched even constructing statement at the point a GMA owner has quoted, naming this particular deal price of 200 billion. So roller coaster is mauni siya ang flow sa business. So with the higher share price, so ang GMA 7 is to mga stockholder can command a higher deal price than in effect for making transaction the more expensive for the Pangilinan groups.
Introduction. The foundation of the good corporate governance is the intellectual honesty of the directors and senior management. This intellectual honesty is expressed by acting in the best interests of the incapacitated company, the corporation, on the formation of is a juridical person, but it is absolutely incapacitated until its directors are appointed, and the board in turn delegates to management to implementation of the collective decision. This is the quality of the governance important and not the quantity. So mindless the complainants with a set of rules, it is not a good governance. So a good governance is cannot acting with responsibility, accountability, fairness, and transparency. So it has a weathering effective with effective on the misconduct, and it is absolutely critical in communicating to stakeholder and decision of the board. So a company needs the right people, then team the processes. So the right team, the making up the board must determine a common understanding of the purposes of the company, the values, the drive of its business, and who have the important stakeholder. In that board, in that board, it is a decision making process. So we need to account the legitimate the interest of the expectation of the stakeholder of in the company. Corporate governance in the Philippines. Corporate governance is needed to make corporate management more accountable and their auditors are more rigorous, but good governance requires fair legal framework that should be enforced impartially. So this is a the scandal that brought down for the stock market image and the weekend of the private of investor that confidence. So this scandal have their roots in the management desire to project a false picture of the performance with the aim of driving up the value of the corporation in the competitive global market. Ang Philippine Securities and Exchange Commission or SEC is a principal player in the matter of the corporate governance is issue that memorandum of the circular number 2 series of the 2002, so others known as a code of the corporate governance under the SEC resolution of number 135 on date April 4, 2002. So the code is effective and must be followed under the pain of the penalty. So the code is this is the code to apply. So the code aims to promote the corporate governance to reform that will arise the investor confidence and develop the capital market and help achieve high sustained growth for the corporate sector and the company. So the code applies is first to corporation whose securities and registered or listed. Second is corporation who are guarantees of the permits or license and the secondary franchises from the commission. Third, public companies, and last is branches or subsidiaries of foreign corporation operating in the Philippines and whose the security are registered or listed. So this is the sum of the codes salient of the future as a follow. Mani siya ang atong i-follow sa mga code na para dili makuan sa mga penalty. Next is the board of shall constitution of the committees in a good corporate governance. So in this code prescribe that the board directors is primarily responsible for the governance of the corporation. So the board should be established the corporation, the vision and mission, strategic objective, policies and producers that guide and direct the activities of the company and mechanics and for monitoring management performance sa mga performance. And this is the shall board of constitution, the committee in of good governance. So first, the audit committee. So the audit is the responsibility the calculate in the mind of the board members the importance of the sound system of the internal control and the board's oversight of the responsibility. Second, the nomination committee. So the function is to review and evaluate the qualifications of the all person nominated to the board. And lastly is the compensation or remuneration committee. The task is to establish a formal and transparent procedure for developing a policy on executive remuneration. So this is to emphasize the importance of the work of the corporate security. Then we must the Filipino and an officer for the corporation. It should work and deal fairly and objectively with all the constituencies of the corporation. So the board through the audit committee shall recommend to the stockholders to accredit to external auditor who shall undertake the independent to audit and shall provide an objective to assurance so on the way which is a financial statement and prepare the presented. So the external auditor should be rotated every 5 years na siya or earlier na handling partner should be changed. So ang sa stakeholder the right should be respected is first voting right. Next is preemptive right, and third is power inspector, the right to information, the right to dividends and appraisal right among others. So this is the management may establish a performance evaluation system to measure of the performance of the board and top levels of management of the corporation. So the more na transparent sa internal working of the company and cash flow, the more difficult it will be for management and controlling shareholders and misappropriate or mismanage company asset. Corporate governance in PLDT experts. As a publicly listed Philippine corporation, PLDT is covered by corporate governance rules and regulations of the Philippine Security and Exchange Commission or Philippine SEC and the Philippine Stock Exchange o PSA. So ang PLDT is voluntary complies with the corporate governance standard sa United States and sa America. Depository shares are listed and traded in the New York Stock Exchange. So the PLDT associate the company with the First Pacific Company, and which is the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, also the corporate governance standard of the Hong Kong for guidance for benchmarking purposes. So the most importantly is to ensure the beyond the compliance and to promote an ethical corporate culture guided by the principles of the accountability, integrity, and fairness and transparency. Internal foundation of the corporate governance. So, first is Board of Directors. A board of directors is a body of elected or appointed by the shareholder who jointly oversee the activities and the overall managerial and operational aspect of the corporation. This said, the activity are determined by the powers, duties, responsibility delegate to the guarantee by the authority from the shareholders by the law itself. As a mention of the praise of the board director is to average investor will probably is imagine the images of the nice dressed men and women and a well set and no converge for around the bringing the corporate folders with them. If we ask the average investor to explain the main responsibilities of the board directors only very well will be able to give you a good or definitive answer. Authority and responsibility and the purpose of the board directors. So the most important responsibility of the board of directors is to protect the resources entrusted to them by the shareholders and make sure the latter receive a decent return on their investment. The sentimental is much of different daghan sa mga directors na there are feel that the primary responsibility for to protect to employees of a company. First ang shareholders, second is the social, political, and business climates to incorporate the profitability and subordinate to the needs of employees. Structure and makeup of the board of directors. So the board is made up of individual men and women, the director, who are elected by the shareholder. So many companies work on the rotating system so that they only a fraction of the director are up for the election each year. This make it much more difficult for complete board exchange to take the place due to the hostile for takeover. In fact, so sa system of the purposely sa employed as a device as the one of the tactic under the anti-takeover defenses. So the most cases director is either first ang have invested interest in the company, and two is work in upper management of the company. Is the last is are independent from the company but are known for their business abilities. Next is Committee on the Board Directors. The Board of Directors' responsibility includes the institution of the Audit and Compensation Committees. So, in this committee is the Audit Committee is the responsible in making sure the company financial statement and report so reasonably to accurate and used for fair, dapat fair siya and to accordance siya with the applicable for financial reporting for the standard. In the compensation committee places for the base compensation as stock option awards and incentive bonuses for the companies to executives for including the CEO or the recent years many boards of director have come under for allowing for executive salary to reach at the unchecked levels. And lastly, the is ownership structure and its impact on board directors. The particular ownership structure of the corporation has a huge impact on the efficiency and effectiveness of the board of directors to govern on. Kung ang director has a trouble to he can appeal things the controlling of the shareholder. Lastly is ownership structure and its impact on the board directors. The particular ownership structure of a corporation has a huge impact on the efficiency effectiveness of the board director to the governance. Kung ang company were no controlling the shareholder exists, so ang director should act if one day exists and attempt to protect the imaginary entity at all the times, and even to extent of firing the CEO, making changes sa structure that are the unpopular within the management, or turning down application due to the cost consideration.
I am the second reporter of Group 3. I am De Los Santos, so CEO or Chief Executive Officer. It is usually the singular organizational position that principally accountable in carrying out the strategic policies and procedures as established by the BODs, which means Board of Directors. Delivery of program, product, and services, or PPS. Companies spend thousands or even millions to determine what products or services that are going to produce. They will buy expensive machines and hire competent chemists or other field to help in producing a new product or services. Also, it is good to be a pioneer in the market because you own the wholesale sales, thus company will not stop in doing something just to cater the needs and wants of the customer. Financial risk and task management. Financial risk management is the practice of protecting economic values in a firm by using financial instruments to manage exposure to risk, operational risk, credit risk, and market risk. Foreign exchange risk, shape risk, volatility risk, liquidity risk, inflation risk, business risk, legal risk, and lastly, reputational risk. And human capital management, or HCM, is the process of hiring the right people, managing workforces effectively, and optimizing productivity. It has evolved from a mostly administrative function to a critical enabler of business value. PR, or public relations, refers to managing how others see and feel about a person, brand, or a company. Public relations corporation, notably publicly traded companies, focuses on maintaining a positive corporate image while handling a major requests and shareholder inquiries. CFO, or Chief Financial Officer. It is also refers to a senior executive responsible for managing the financial actions of a company. The CFO's duty include taking cash flows and financial planning, as well as analyzing the company's financial strengths and weaknesses and proposing corrective actions. Implement internal controls. Internal controls are the mechanism, rules, and procedures implemented by a company to ensure the integrity of financial and accounting information, promote accountability, and prevent fraud. Supervises major impact projects. Outside of implementing and monitoring company controls relating finance, an effective CFO also handles and supervises those projects that require significant quantitative and qualitative interpretations and analysis in order to reach an understanding of the options that are available. Develops relation with financing sources. One of the most important responsibility of an effective CFO or chief financial officer is to institute good working relationship with banks and other financial institutions that may impact on the company's ability to finance operations. Advisor to management. A good CFO or chief financial officer can facilitate and help the business owners, executives, and other top managers make substantial connection between a company's operations and its financial performance that are reflected in the actual figures and also with that projections. Drives major strategic issues. A good CFO can also be expected to take part in important role of getting involved on some major strategic issues that will have impact on the company's long-term future. Also, these issues include the hatching of the company acquisition strategy, which in the end would help fuel and boost the company's additional growth. Also, keeping an eye of diverse diversification of a particular product lines, business activities, and portfolio is also a part of the CFO's concern. Risk manager. CFOs are close to the internal control system and financial reports which pass through many operational areas. CFOs are high-ranking officers doing real and actual things in the infantry. The CFO may be in the best position to anticipate high risk transactions and adverse consequences of changing external environment. Relationship rule. The CFO will work together with the CEO, the board of directors, the audit committee, and the internal auditor and the external auditor. CFO serves the bridge between this variety of parties within the organizational external environment. Objective referee. CFO needs to demonstrate impartiality, such as advising the CEO or the board of directors on accounting matters, in consonance with the principle of good corporate governance. Board of directors, audit committee, and CEOs need to understand all sides of financial accounting or disclosure issues so they can make an informed that rational decision. The CFO can also trusted advisor in matters of financing reporting. Shareholder. A shareholder, also referred to a stockholder, is a person, company, or institution that own at least one of share of company's stock, which is known as equity. Because shareholders are essential owners in the company, they reap the benefits of a business success. Shareholder rights and responsibility. The shareholders of any company have a responsibility to ensure that the company is well run and well managed. They do this by monitoring the performance of the company and raising their objections or giving their approval to the actions of the management of the company. Reviewing the role of shareholders. The shareholders are the owners of company and provide financial backing in return for potential dividends over the lifetime of the company. A person or a corporation can become a shareholder of a company in three ways: by subscribing to the memorandum of company during incorporation. General. General means belonging to or prevailing throughout a whole class or body collectively and irrespective of individuals. Lastly, shareholder ability to change the board. A board of directors elected by shareholders but nominated by a nominations committee. Stockholder own shares in the company which makes them collective owners. They elect a board of directors to lead their companies and look out for the investment interest. Boards have a legal responsibility to govern on behalf of a stockholder and help companies prosper. That would be all.
This is Mary Lape, and I'll be discussing the external environment of corporate governance. So when we say external environment, this deals about the outside factors which influence the impact of the operation of the business. External environment is an organization's big picture wherein referred as the general environment is an inclusive concept that involves all the outside factors and influences that impacts the operation of a business that an organization must respond or react to in order for them to maintain its flows of operations. Auditors. One of the most important external institutions in governance is the independent auditors. Their job is to help to ensure that firms are run efficiently by keeping public records accurate, adhering standards of reporting for public purposes, and taxes paid properly and on time. So the auditors, they are the person who are responsible or assigned in a firm to perform an audit on organization. Legal environment. This derives partly from the general political climate in a country. It refers to all the legal surroundings that affects projects' activities. It consists of an array of acts, rules, regulations. It defines what project can do and cannot do. Legal environment is concerned with protecting the rights and interests of clients, contractors, employees, and the society. So, when we say legal environment, it will always depend on the country that the business is being conducted to. So, legal environment has a three distinct dimensions. The first one is the domestic laws of the home country. The second one is the domestic laws of each of foreign markets. And the last one is the international laws in general. Markets consider the most important institutions of corporate governance. And there are three central and important points of the term markets. These are the first one is the firm's product markets. When we say the firm's product market, it is a product marketing involves finding ways to build a brand that reflects your company's standards and vision. You also need to determine what benefits the product provides your customers, such as improving their work or home life because of its features and benefits. The second one is the capital market. When we say capital markets, these are the financial markets that brings buyers and sellers together to trade stocks, bonds, currencies, and other financial assets. It includes the stock markets and the bonds market. They help people with ideas become entrepreneurs and help small businesses grow into big companies. The last one is the managerial labor market. When we say managerial labor, these are which market participants functions as both investors and managers. Other external factors. External factors create major threats or in some cases precursor of openings and possibilities for an organization. So, outside factors may have different effects into an organization. It may somehow help them to grow more or discover different innovations, or somehow it can affect them in losing the opportunity that they have already. And an organization is directly affected by events happening in the environment that it is supposed to be functioning in. Changes in an environment may have different effects into an organization. For if they can cope up with the changes in an environment, or they can possibly don't. Next is political environment. Politics of a country or region that an organization is functioning affects the policies and benefits that an organization derives from a system. It is also the major pool from which the human resources of an organization is selected from, and hence it is likely to shape an organization both internally and externally. Political environment. It is the state government and its institution and legislation and the public and the private stakeholders who operate and interact with or influence the system. The political atmosphere should be good and very stable for a firm to operate successfully. Technological environment. Any new development may render an organization's processes and systems obsolete if it is not quick to adapt to the new changes. So, when we say technological environment, this means the development in the field of the technology which affects the business by new inventions of productions and other improvements in technologies in order for them to perform the business work. Technology change somehow can have the advantage or an opportunity for a business. But obviously, new technology can create new products and services, thereby creating entire new markets for a business. Moreover, improvements in the technological products and processes can increase productivity and reduce cost. The last one is the social environment. This is the most basic external factors which comprises the general behavior of the society and the ethical learning of the individuals responsible for the functioning and eventual long-term existence of the organizations. A person's social environment is their society and all surroundings that influenced in some way by humans. It includes all the relationship, institution, the culture, and their other perceptions. Let's go to the corporate protection within legal boundaries. Anti-takeover defenses. It is a tactics come in many different forms and appearances. These tactics designed to make a company unattractive to predators. Technical languages such as shark repellent and poison pill are used to describe the defenses means or tactics that companies use to challenge a lurking merger of two or more businesses into one. When we say shark repellent, it is a measure taken by a company to fend off an unwanted takeover attempt. The following may be done to prevent the unwelcome takeovers. Flip in allows existing shareholders to purchase more shares at a discount in order to dilute the value of the share. The second one is the flip over. Allows the shareholder to purchase the bidder shares at a discount. Acquisitions of previous issued stock in the open market. And the fourth one is a provision such as one can never be a board member if you are already a board member of a competitor's company. Next one is the supermajority vote as prerequisite of company's major move like merger consolidation or acquisition, issuance of additional stocks, and reacquisitions of previous issued stocks. A provision in the company's charter or articles of incorporation which allows shareholders to sell their shares to the bidders for more than the market price. The next one is the debt facade, a play wherein a company takes on plenty of debt to make it unappealing, as a bidder would be answerable for those debt once he will become shareholder. The debenture sheltering, business issues bonds that will have to be rendered at a higher price in the future. Company offers its employees stock options, high bonuses, and exceptional severance pay that would hurt the bidder's pocket very much if takeovers would take place. These are the three advantages of anti-takeover defenses. The first one is anti-takeover tactics are positive when company has the sense to believe that its stock has a higher market price than reflected and thus may become the target for a takeover. Second advantage is these tactics are good when the predator company's purpose is to acquire the company and then use it for not good purposes which would not benefit the constituent companies. And the last advantage is the short-term poison pills may help business go through difficult financial periods when they could be defenseless targets. Of course, if it has an advantage, then therefore it has also a disadvantage. So the disadvantage of anti-takeover defenses is that it will prevent a genuinely good takeover purpose or aim. The second disadvantage is these tactics are sometimes used to embed management and prevent shareholders from selling their stocks and maximizing its price. And the last disadvantage of anti-takeover defense is that board members who are already in their comfort zone sometimes hide behind poison pills to retain their positions. Following actions should be observed in using anti-takeover tactics. First is check that the use of anti-takeover strategies is legal in the country. Second, thoroughly examine what method would provide the greatest protection without hurting the company's image and value. The third one is avoid tying the company to stock options, lofty bonuses, and special severance pay. The fourth one is calculate the risk associated to this. Debts. Consult with partners, directors, lawyers, and accountants before initiating anti-takeover strategies. Don't use anti-takeover strategies except when you are sure that it will not backfire. Liability issues and indemnifications of officers. Personal liability of officers and directors. Officers and directors may be personally liable for financial harm caused to the corporation if they issues involving misappropriation, involving non-disclosure of conflict of interest, issues on loyalty, issues in non-separation of personal and business concerns, and lastly, issues on prudence. Indemnification of officers and directors refers to the act of the reimbursing officers and directors for expenses incurred, liabilities occurred, and amounts paid in defending claims brought to them for actions taken on behalf of the corporation. Shareholders should recognize that ang absence of sa kanina method which is trying to limit the personal liability of the officers and directors for claims brought against them, it will be very difficult for the corporation to find someone or anyone who is willing to take such risky job of serving as officers or directors. Directors and officers insurance. Corporations are allowed to purchase insurance to cover matters resulting from acts taken by officers and directors. This insurance coverage is different and separate from the general liability insurance, the corporate packet, considering that it is not cheap. There are matters that cannot be indemnified under the law or the companies does not have the enough resources to indemnify officers and directors. So in this case, the appropriate remedy would be insurance coverage. This insurance coverage intended to protect individuals from the personal losses if they are sued as a result of serving as a director or an officer of a business or other type of organization.
Hi everyone, I am Mary Jade Pacania, the fourth reporter. Shareholders' impossible limitations through classes of stock. A company may have different types of shares that come with different conditions and rights. So there are four main types of shares. First, the ordinary shares. These are standard shares with no special rights or restrictions. Ordinary shares, also called common shares, are stocks sold on a public exchange. Each share of stock generally gives its owner the right to one vote at a company's shareholders meeting. So these shares have additional rights compared to preferred shares, but are paid last in the case of liquidation and dividend distribution. Ordinary shares may be fully or partially paid, and also it allows investors to vote at meetings and receive dividends from the company's earnings. So second, preference shares. These shares typically carry a right that gives the holder preferential treatment when annual dividends are distributed to shareholders. So preference shares, more commonly referred to as preferred stock, are shares of a company stock with dividends that are paid out to shareholders before common stock dividends are issued. If the company enters bankruptcy, preferred stockholders are entitled to be paid from company's assets before common stockholders. Shares in this category have a fixed value, which means that the shareholder would not benefit from an increase in the business profits. However, usually they have the rights to their dividend ahead of ordinary shareholders if the business is in trouble. Also, where a business will be liquidated and wind up, they are likely to be repaired the par value or liquidating value of the shares ahead of ordinary shareholders. So third, cumulative preference shares. So these shares give holders the right that if a dividend cannot be paid 1 year, it will be carried forward to the succeeding years. So cumulative preferred stock is a type of preference share that has a provision that mandates a company must pay all dividends, including those were missed previously, to cumulative preferred shareholders. So this class of shareholders is to be paid ahead of other classes of preferred stock shareholders and ahead of common stock shareholders. So dividends on cumulative preference shares must be paid despite the earnings level of the business. So fourth, the redeemable shares. These shares come with agreement that the company can buy them back at a future date. This can be at a fixed date or at the choice of the business. A company cannot issue only redeemable shares. So redeemable preference shares are those shares where the issuer of the share has the right to redeem the shares within 20 years of the issuance at predetermined price mentioned in the prospectus at the time of issuance of preference shares. And before redeeming such shares, the issuer shall assure that redeemable preference shares are paid up in full and all the conditions specified at the time of issuance are fulfilled. Redeemable preference shares are those type of preference shares issued to shareholders which have a callable option embedded, meaning they can be redeemed later by the company. So it is also one of the methods that companies embrace in order to return cash to the existing shareholders of the company. It is a way of share repurchase but is different from the traditional share purchases in certain ways. Supermajority refers to percentage of ownership that is way above the simple majority, which one half plus one share of the total shares outstanding. Usually, supermajority could mean 67% to 90%. Supermajority is a requirement for a proposal to gain a specified level of support which is greater than the threshold of more than one half used for a simple majority. Supermajority is often requisite for a company to take certain actions as amending the charter. In some cases, to protect the company from predator, some companies require supermajorities as anti-takeover measures. So, for example, a company may require two-thirds of the shareholders to approve a merger acquisition. Supermajority provisions may be needed principally to make certain the company's independent survival. This may limit, however, the board of directors' elbow of authority and may even hamper a friendly and rational takeover that may do more good for the company. Related concepts regarding alternatives of the majority vote requirement include a majority of the entire membership and a majority of fixed membership. A supermajority can also be specified based on the entire membership or fixed membership rather than on those present and voting. Shareholder voting agreements. A shareholder voting agreement is a legal contract among shareholders of corporation involving voting of shares. So, the shareholder voting agreements frequently covers how members of the board of directors are to be selected and occasionally covers a major corporate events such as mergers and acquisitions. A shareholder voting agreement, shareholders may choose to pool their votes for a particular goal. Voting agreements may stipulate that the involved shareholders will cast the vote their shares collectively or cooperatively. So one of your key rights as shareholders is the right to vote your shares in corporate elections. Shareholder voting rights give you the power to elect directors at annual or special meetings and make your views known to a company management and directors on significant issues that may affect the value of your shares. Those shareholder management agreements. Together with the company's article of incorporation, which regulates conduct of the company, what gives investors their most important contractual protection is the shareholders agreement. This agreement will only be relevant, of course, if the corporate structure is being used. Agreements of this kind are by far the most recommendable system or method for the protection of shareholders. A shareholders agreement is an agreement among a company's shareholders that describes how the company should be operated and outlines shareholders' rights and obligations. The shareholders agreement is intended to make sure that shareholders are treated fairly and that their rights are protected. The purpose of shareholders agreement is it explains how the company will be run, how decisions will be made, and what happens when shareholders disagree or someone wishes to exit. It governs all of the key aspects of the relationship between a company's shareholders. Main features of a shareholders agreement. Board appointment rights. It is common for the shareholders' agreement to establish the relative rights of representation that the shareholders will have on the company's board of directors of the company. So it is a right to appoint and remove a director to a board of directors. Investors typically want the right to appoint at least one director to represent them on the board of an investee company. This right may be subject to the investor or investors maintaining a minimum percentage of shares in the company. So minority shareholder may seek to have one director on the board in order to be kept informed of matters discussed at board level. A larger shareholder may seek to appoint a large number of directors to reflect its proportionate holding of shares at a board level. Usually, the agreement will provide that any director appointed by a shareholder can only be removed by that party. So next, veto rights. Veto rights refer to the right to overturn decisions referred by the board. This process involves listing of material things that cannot be done without the investor's prior consent and ratification. So these normally range from fundamental matters such as issuing further shares, commitment of shares, capital expenditure, and so on. So veto right is understood as the right to reject, refuse to pass a majority resolution. The veto rights of shareholders is understood as the right of shareholders or groups of shareholders who own a certain percentage of shares in the company to reject a resolution, which is approved by the majority of shareholders. The group of members who own a certain percentage of the capital contributed to the company is entitled to reject a resolution of the members' council, which is approved by the majority of members. So next, adoption and amendment of business plans and budgets. So the agreement may provide a process for adopting and amending business plans and budgets to ensure that individual shareholders or their appointed directors are properly represented in that process. So from the word itself, it is to make certain that individual shareholders or their designated directors are fully informed in the process. So scope of business. Although this thing can be found in the charter of the corporation, it is common particularly in a joint venture or a startup company. For the shareholders' agreement specify the scope of business that the company will conduct and provide that consent required from the shareholders before the company can change the nature of its business or do some diversification attempts. Scope of business outlines the time and cost of a business project. So before the company may change its business strategy or pursue expansion, the shareholders must provide their consent. Intellectual property rights, where shareholder parties are contributing unique and advantage or process such patent, trademark, copyrights, or any form of information or competencies where shareholder parties are contributing unique and distinct advantage or to a venture. The shareholders' agreement may provide for the ownership and licenses of intellectual property rights, preserving certain such rights for the parties themselves and others to the company. This is another common agreement in a joint venture company. Intellectual property rights are the rights given to persons over the creations of their minds. So they usually give the creator an exclusive right over the use of his or her creation for a certain period of time. So next, right to information. It is extremely important for the investors to monitor performance closely, particularly to give them an early warning if things are starting to go wrong. So the right to access information guarantees everyone the right of access to all information and documents regardless of the status of the concerned person and the purpose for obtaining the required information. Accordingly, they will expect a contractual right to receive regular reports, management accounts, cash flow forecasts, and so on, together with statutory accounts. The investor will also often seek the right to have its own director appointed to the board. He will expect board meetings to be held regularly and all material decisions to be made by the board. So, warranties from the management team. In general terms, these are series of statements about the company that the investors would expect to be true and accurate. It is unlikely that this statement will be little more than confirmations that the team stands behind its business plan, that the company is clean, and that the team knows of nothing that has been withheld from investors. However, at subsequent funding rounds, once the company has a track record, the warranties will extend to the company's general trading affairs, and this actually the statement of management responsibility intended to be given to shareholders and other interested parties of the corporation. Next are strategic investor rights, where a shareholder is looking for more than a return on its investment. The shareholders' agreement may provide an opportunity to negotiate terms covering secondary commercial agreements, such as giving shareholders or its group first right or of refusal on certain type of business or contract with the company, or the right to be informed of and to co-invest in investment to be made by the company. Strategic investors negotiate for special investment um, often negotiate for a special investment right as part of any future equity financing round by the startup. The most commonly requested special right is that the strategic investor be provided with a preemptive right to invest in future financing on the same terms of presented by any third party. So next are restrictions on transfers of shares. The investors will be keen to make sure that the management team they are backing or holds onto their shares. In certain circumstances, managers will be permitted through an agreement to transfer shares to family or to trust. Shares of stock are generally free transferable. However, in a closely held corporation, the shareholders frequently want to control who can be a shareholder. One of the fundamental purposes of a shareholder agreement is to provide the shareholders control over who can and cannot be a shareholder, which is he or she can be trusted. Restrictive covenants. This will make it clear that while members of the management are employed and for a period of time afterwards, they cannot compete with the company or solicit customers or employees. So restrictive covenants are also often incorporated into shareholders' agreement to ensure that shareholders vote during the time they hold shares and for a period of time after they are no longer shareholders are prevented from competing with the business of the company. So one would expect these covenants to fit together with restrictive covenants contained in employment agreements, but the covenants in the shareholders agreement will be directly in favor of the investors. It is obviously critical from the management perspective that they are comfortable with the covenants they are entering to. And lastly, exit provisions. A shareholding in a private company is by its nature illiquid because there is no market live and open of the shares. Accordingly, a shareholders agreement will very often include provisions that are intended to encourage or facilitate a realization by the shareholders of their investment. Once again, this is particularly important for minority shareholders who are unable to control an exit process. So it enables majority shareholders to take advantage of a good opportunity to sell the business. So these types of clauses give a shareholder who wants to exit to put their shares on the table by giving notice, requiring other shareholders to purchase their shares under certain circumstances. There are of course many other detailed provisions in an average shareholders agreement. It is normally sophisticated legal document. No business angel, private equity firm or institutional investor should invest a substantial amount in any company without protecting himself with contractual rights in a shareholders agreement. And that is all for my report.
Hello everyone, my name is Russell Shout. I will be the last reporter for today. The first lesson is the behavioral management theory. It is called the human relations movement because it addresses the human dimensions of work. It believed that a better understanding of human behavior at work, such as motivation, conflict, expectation, group dynamics, and improved productivity. Meaning, if makabalo og makasabot ka sa imong mga employees, if unsa ilang gusto, unsa ilang makamotivate, unsa ilang problems ug ma-address nimo, mas mo increase ilang productivity kay ganahan man sila mo work sa ilang workplace. Next is Elton Mayo. His contributions part of the Hawthorne studies, a series of experiments that rigorously applied classical management theory. The Hawthorne experiment consisted of two studies conducted at the Hawthorne Works of the Western Electric Company in Chicago from 1924 to 1932. He conducted experiment to a group of engineers and discovered that workers' productivity increases as the lighting level decreases until such time that they can no longer see that productivity declines. The general conclusion from Hawthorne studies was that human relations and social needs of workers are crucial aspects of business management. So, he proposed that employees are not that motivated by pay and environmental factors, but positive relationship factors, meaning not only of salary and good working condition, they are motivated by rather relationship with coworkers and employers. Abraham Maslow, a practicing psychologist, developed need theory, a theory of motivation based upon a consideration of human needs. So this is his three assumptions. Number 1, human needs are never completely satisfied, even though they achieve it to buy, but still never satisfied. Number 2, human behavior is purposely and is motivated by the needs for satisfaction. 3, needs can be classified according to hierarchical structure of importance from lowest to highest. Maslow broke down the needs hierarchy into 5 specific areas. So you can see at the images, in the image, these are the 5 needs. That before reaching to the highest form of needs, which is self-actualization, one must satisfy first their psychological, safety, belongingness, esteem. Douglas MacGregor. He was heavily influenced by both the Hawthorne studies and Maslow. He believed that two basic kinds of manager exist. Number 1, Theory X and Theory Y. In Theory X, manager has a negative view of employees and assumes that they are lazy and untrustworthy and incapable of assuming responsibility. So, ang manager, iyang githink sa iyang mga employees nga, mga bati sila, tapulan, di magtinarong sa work, not doing their best. In number 2, Theory Y, managers assume employees are not only trustworthy and capable of assuming responsibility, but also have high levels of motivation. So, kaning usa ka manager, is na siya nakita na nindot og batason og masaligan iyang mga employees. Mamotivate ang mga employees kung magtinarong sila sa ilang work o musaka ilahang rank. Frederick Herzberg. He is a respected American. He contributes how managers think about motivation at work. He published his theory in a book entitled The Motivation to Work in 1954 and put forward a two-factor content theory referred as two-need system. It is a content theory which explains the factors of individual motivation by identifying their needs and desire. what satisfy their needs and desires, and by establishing the aims that they pursue to satisfy their desire. So these are the two categories of factors of motivation: hygiene and motivation factors. Hygiene, which can demotivate or cause dissatisfaction if not present, but do not very often create satisfaction when they are present. Example, company policy, supervision, relationship with boss, work conditions, salary, relationship with peers. No, so example nga tagaan kag salary nga gamay kayo, nya feel down nga wala kay gana magtrabaho kay grabe man kag maningkamot nya imong salary kay gamay ra man kayo. Second, motivation factors do motivate or create satisfaction and are rarely the cause of dissatisfaction. Example, achievement, recognition, the work itself, responsibility, advancement, and growth. So mao ni imong boss na grabe kay kag kita siya na grabe kag maningkamot mo dako gyud imong sweldo. Daghan kay gi-achieve, musakag gyud na imong rank sa imong work. Develop the concept of two distinct human needs. 1. Physiological needs. Avoiding unpleasantness or discomfort may be fulfilled via money to buy food and shelter. 2. Psychological needs. The need for personal development fulfilled by activities which cause on one to grow. So, kana sabotable naman kayo na silang duha. Findings have been extremely influential in developments associated with the field of job design and methods of management to provide job satisfaction and motivation. Next is reframing organization. It reflects their personal styles and that focus on different aspects of any particular problem. So these are the four frames. Number 1, structural approach. It concentrates on strategy. Number 2, human resource. It focuses on giving employees the power or opportunity to perform their jobs well, addressing their needs for human contact, personal growth, and job satisfaction. Number 3, political view. It addresses the problem of individuals and interest group. Number 4, symbolic frame. It addresses the people's needs for a sense of purpose and meaning in their work. Lastly, employee stock ownership plan or ESOP. A kind of employee benefit plan similar in some ways to a profit-sharing plan. In an ESOP, a company sets up a trust fund into which it contributes new share on its own stock or cash to buy existing shares. Company that set up an ESOP creates a trust to employees which it makes annual contribution. Allocation may be proportion to compensation, years of service, or a combination of both. The ESOP company made an employee benefit wherein employees end up owning part of the company and gives them the right to control and vote. Once they leave the company, their share will be brought back at a fair market value in cash. So, ang advantages ana kay ma-create og higher productivity, employment retirement, tax advantage, high job satisfaction. So that's all of my report. Thank you.